Listen to how a criminal enterprise sounds when it actually scales. A Shopify store that gets its payment processor cut off, a legitimate business that loses its bank account. These are existential events that destroy companies overnight. Now consider a cybercrime operation that loses its payment processor and its bank, and simply rebuilds both in under a week using a network of shell companies and a payment system that no regulator can touch. That operation just shrugged off a blow that would have bankrupted a legitimate business, and it did it using an infrastructure that costs less than a used Honda Civic to assemble. Every year, this industry moves somewhere between $8 trillion and $10 trillion through the global financial system. That figure is not a typo. That is more than the combined GDP of every country in Africa, South America, and Oceania put together. The naive version of this story goes something like this. A kid in a hoodie sits in a dark room, types some code, hits enter, and money pours out of an ATM somewhere. That image has been drilled into popular culture by a decade of movies and true crime podcasts, and it is almost completely wrong. The real economics of a cybercrime empire look nothing like a lone genius stealing from banks. They look like a Fortune 500 company with a hostile HR department, a supply chain that spans 4 continents, and a payroll that includes people who have never touched a computer. The people running these operations do not write code. They do not hack anything. They run logistics, manage customer support, negotiate vendor contracts, and handle disputes with the same professional detachment as a regional manager at a mid-sized insurance firm. Here is the contradiction that nobody tells you about. The most profitable cybercrime operations in the world do not steal money from rich people. They steal small amounts from enormous numbers of ordinary people, automate the entire process, and run it like a utility company. A single ransomware campaign in 2023 demanded payments that averaged around $170,000 per victim. But the volume play, the mass market product of the cybercrime world, is the one that steals $29 at a time from 200,000 people who will never notice and never report it. That business model generates revenue that would make a mid-cap tech company jealous, and it does it with a customer acquisition cost of essentially zero. So how does this actually work as an economy? Every empire needs capital, infrastructure, labor, and market access, and the cybercrime empire runs on all 4. Except its labor force is recruited like a multi-level marketing scheme, and its market access is bought and sold on platforms that look disturbingly similar to legitimate e-commerce sites. The infrastructure alone tells you everything about how sophisticated this has become. A full criminal toolkit, meaning the software, the hosting, the payment processing, and the customer support, can be rented for as little as $40 a month on the dark web. There are subscription tiers. There are enterprise licenses. There is literally a customer support ticket system where victims' stolen data is processed with the efficiency of a SaaS onboarding flow. When you actually trace the money, the structure becomes almost laughably corporate. The average ransomware gang operates with a revenue-sharing model where the developers get around 20 to 30%. The affiliates who deploy the malware get 50 to 60%, and the infrastructure providers get the rest. That is a commission structure you would recognize from any legitimate software reseller agreement. The gangs even run formal recruitment programs, complete with training documents, marketing materials, and in some documented cases, a standards compliance manual that dictates how much ransom a victim should be charged based on their company size. They have product tiers, volume discounts, and a reputation system that works exactly like an eBay seller rating. But here is the part that breaks the analogy. The moment this empire touches the real economy, it has to launder money through legitimate businesses that are either complicit, negligent, or completely unaware of what is flowing through their accounts. And that is where the entire structure becomes most fragile, because the cybercrime empire's greatest asset, its scale, is also its greatest vulnerability. every single transaction that crosses from the digital underworld into the physical economy leaves a trace. And the people who build the infrastructure know it, which raises the question that the entire industry is designed to answer and designed to fail at. How do you turn $1 billion of stolen digital value into a house in Miami without the house in Miami becoming evidence? The answer hides in plain sight, and it is almost insultingly simple. You do not convert the digital dollar into real estate directly. You convert it into an asset that looks like it could have come from anywhere. And then you let the legitimate economy do the laundering for you. This is the second layer of the empire, the one that the hackers themselves rarely touch, and it is run by a completely different class of criminal. These are not hoodie-wearing teenagers in basement apartments. These are the people who understand that the real money in cybercrime is not in the ransom. It is in the conversion. The ransom is just revenue. The conversion is the margin, and the margin is where the fortune actually lives. So the structure looks like this. A gang in Eastern Europe takes a ransom in Bitcoin, and the value is frozen in a blockchain, which is public, permanent, and completely traceable. This is the core tension that nobody mentions in the sensational headlines. Bitcoin is not anonymous, it is pseudonymous. Every single coin has a history, and that history is written in an immutable ledger that law enforcement has learned to read better than anyone ever expected. So the first move is to break the chain. The ransom money is pushed through a mixer which pools thousands of transactions together and spits them out in randomized chunks, making it exponentially harder to trace which coin came from which victim. This is the digital equivalent of throwing a marked bill into a casino's slot machine and hoping the cashier hands it back to you in smaller, unmarked notes, but with a fee of anywhere from 1 to 3% of the total. And here is where the corporate efficiency gets truly dark. The mixers are not shady back-alley operations anymore. They are professional services with liquidity pools, transaction limits, and customer support that responds within hours. But mixing only gets the money so far. At some point, the crypto has to become a car, a property, a bank account, or a company, and that is where the physical world exercises its brutal advantage. The gangs cannot just walk into a Miami brokerage and wire the Bitcoin. So they build what is effectively a shadow banking system, complete with correspondence, exchange houses, and a network of money mules who move cash across borders in amounts deliberately kept under the reporting threshold of $10,000. This is called structuring, and it is so common that the banks have built entire algorithms to detect it. The algorithms fail constantly, which is precisely why the business keeps operating. The volume here is staggering. In 2023 alone, the average ransomware payment for a single successful campaign clocked in at over $1.5 million. That is not the headline number for the whole year. That is the average per victim. Now multiply that by the hundreds of organizations that pay quietly every single quarter, and you start to understand why the infrastructure of this industry is so polished. The money has to move, and moving it requires a logistics network that rivals any legitimate freight company. You need people to open bank accounts in their own names, people to register shell companies in jurisdictions that do not ask questions, and people to physically carry suitcases of cash across borders where the customs officers are either overworked, underpaid, or simply bought. This is the moment where the cybercrime empire starts to look exactly like the old-school crime empires of the 20th century. And this is also the moment where it becomes most vulnerable, because the physical side of the operation requires humans, and humans are the weakest link in any enterprise. A ransomware developer can sit in a country with no extradition treaty and feel untouchable. But the moment they need a real estate agent in Miami to accept a payment from an anonymous offshore trust, they have exposed themselves to a network of people who can be arrested, flipped, and coerced into becoming witnesses. And this is exactly how most of these empires actually fall. not through brilliant hacking, but through the mundane process of financial audit. The FBI has a division, the Internet Crime Complaint Center, that in 2022 alone received over 800,000 complaints with reported losses exceeding $10 billion. But the headline number obscures the real instrument of collapse. The most successful takedowns of major cybercrime operations in recent years did not happen because someone cracked an encryption algorithm. They happened because the financial trail led from a shell company in the Caribbean to a real person sitting in a coffee shop in Western Europe. The infrastructure that makes the empire scalable, the mixers, the mules, the shell companies, the offshore accounts, is the exact same infrastructure that makes it penetrable. And this brings up the uncomfortable paradox that the smartest players in this industry have already figured out. The bigger the empire gets, the more legitimate it has to appear on the surface. And the more legitimate it appears, the more points of contact it creates with the systems that are designed to catch it. A small operation laundering $100,000 can get away with a single mule and a prepaid card. A billion-dollar empire needs banks, lawyers, accountants, and real estate agents, and every single one of those professionals is a potential informant, a potential audit trail, and a potential turncoat. The scale that makes the money enormous is the scale that makes the empire fragile. So the question becomes not whether they get caught, but which layer of the operation is the one that finally collapses. Is it the technical layer, where the encryption is cracked or the infrastructure is seized by international police operation? Or is it the financial layer, where a single money mule gets arrested at the border and decides that cooperating is a better deal than serving 15 years in a federal prison? The prosecutors know this. The gangs know this. And the entire industry operates on the assumption that eventually someone in the chain will talk. Which raises the final uncomfortable truth about this whole enterprise. The people running these empires are not geniuses who outsmarted the system. They are entrepreneurs who accepted a specific risk profile. And like every entrepreneur who accepts a risk profile, they are one bad quarter away from total collapse. The only variable that actually matters is which quarter it happens in. But before we get to that collapse, we have to look at the thing that keeps the whole machine running. We have to look at the victims, and not the corporate victims with their insurance policies, but the ones who have no security team, no incident response plan, and no choice. Because the economics of the empire only make sense if the people at the bottom keep paying, and the people at the bottom are being squeezed harder than anyone wants to admit. Consider the cargo company that moves 1,000 containers a day through a port like Antwerp or Rotterdam. One container goes missing, and the manifest says it held televisions. The insurer pays out, the shipping company writes it off, and nobody looks too hard because the paperwork is already closed. That single container might have held $200,000 worth of stolen vehicles, or counterfeit pharmaceuticals, or enough fentanyl precursor to flood a mid-sized city. The victim here is not a faceless corporation. The victim is the small business that insured the cargo, the trucking company that loses its contract, and ultimately the consumer who pays higher premiums on everything shipped by sea. This is the quiet layer of the crime economy, the one that never makes the news, and it operates on a scale that makes the headline heists look like pocket change. The ransomware numbers are easier to grasp because they are explicit. In 2023, the average ransom payment for a mid-sized company hits somewhere around $1.2 million, and that is just the payment to unlock the data. Not the cost of the downtime, not the forensic investigation, not the legal fees, not the reputational damage that follows the disclosure. But the gangs running these campaigns are not targeting the Fortune 500 with the expensive cyber insurance. They are targeting the regional hospital with 100 beds, the law firm with 30 employees, the school district that cannot afford a dedicated IT security team. These organizations have the same vulnerability as a multinational, but none of the resources to respond, which makes them the perfect customer. The math is ruthless and simple. A hospital that cannot access its own patient records for 3 days will lose more money in cancelled procedures and diverted ambulances than the ransom itself. The choice is not whether to pay, it is whether to pay quickly or pay slowly. So the empire extracts from the ones who can least afford to resist. And this is where the economics reveal their true shape. The money flows upward through the affiliate structure, and the affiliate structure is designed to make the top of the pyramid nearly untouchable. The developer sells the ransomware as a service and takes a cut of every barely successful deployment, typically between 20 and 30% of the ransom. The affiliate who actually breaches the network and deploys the malware keeps the majority, but they are also the ones taking the operational risk. They are the ones who have to phish the employee, maintain the foothold, and negotiate with the victim. And when the negotiation fails, they are the ones who release the stolen data to a leak site and watch the company's reputation burn in real time. The developer sits at the top, collecting a royalty with no exposure to the messy part of the business. It is a franchise model, and like every franchise model, the brand owner profits whether the individual store succeeds or fails. But there is a flaw in this beautiful corporate structure, and it is the same flaw that runs through every franchise system ever invented. The franchisor cannot control what the franchisee does with the brand. A ransomware developer who licenses their software to 100 affiliates cannot know what each affiliate will do in the moments that matter. Some affiliates will exfiltrate data and sell it to a second buyer instead of destroying it as promised, which destroys the trust that makes the ransom model work. Some affiliates will target a hospital or a water treatment plant or a critical infrastructure provider, which triggers the kind of government response that the entire industry is desperate to avoid. One rogue franchisee can burn the whole network, and the developers know it, which is why the most successful operations maintain strict control over who gets the malware and what they are allowed to do with it. But that control requires trust, and trust is the most expensive commodity in a world where everyone is one arrest away from becoming an informant. This is the paradox that breaks every cybercrime empire eventually. The structure that makes the operation scalable is the same structure that makes it impossible to secure. The developer needs affiliates to deploy the software at scale, but each affiliate is a human being with a phone, a bank account, and a history of poor decisions. The most sophisticated criminal enterprise in history is still built on the fragile foundation of people who, by definition, have already demonstrated that they are willing to cross legal lines for money. And every single one of them, from the top developer to the lowest mule, knows the same thing. The industry has a mandatory retirement age, and it is measured not in years, but in the number of times you get paid before your luck runs out. The question is not whether the empire falls. The question is whether the collapse takes down the whole network or just the unlucky layer that happens to be closest to the ground when the trap finally springs. And if you think the collapse happens quietly, you have never seen what happens when a prosecution decides to cooperate with the people in the exact same business, one floor above the one that just got raided. The quietest moment in a cybercrime empire is the one right before the curtain drops, and nobody ever sees the full choreography of the fall until it is already happening. The developers who built the ransomware empire wake up to a normal morning, maybe planning a migration to a new bulletproof hosting provider, maybe arguing with a coder about a bug in the encryption module. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, a task force in the Netherlands is tapping a server that was supposed to be untouchable, and a prosecutor in the United States is signing off on a seizure warrant that names not one person but 147. The warrant does not care about the careful hierarchy, the trust system, or the profit-sharing agreement. The warrant sees the infrastructure, and the infrastructure, as it turns out, is the empire's most fatal vulnerability. Here is the part of the story that never makes it into the press release. The average ransom payment in 2023 hovered around $1.54 million, but the real money in the industry was always made by the people who built the tools, not the people who use them. The affiliate who deployed the ransomware took the operational risk. The affiliate sat at the keyboard for weeks, maybe months, infiltrating a network, mapping the domain controllers, finding the backup server, and then deploying the encryption that locked down a hospital in Ohio or a logistics company in Germany. The affiliate got the stress, the paranoia, and the sleepless nights. The developer, meanwhile, sat in an apartment somewhere and collected a flat percentage of every single successful deployment, with none of the operational exposure and all of the leverage. The affiliate could be arrested and the empire would lose one franchisee. The developer could be arrested and the whole franchise system would collapse in a matter of weeks because the developer held the code, the decryption keys, and the reputation that made the affiliates trust the brand in the first place. So the developers, being rational actors, made a decision that sounds brilliant on paper and is catastrophic in practice. They centralized the crown jewels. They kept the code in one place, the decryption keys in one place, and the communication channels in one place, because that was the only way to maintain control over a distributed network of criminals who had never met each other and never would. This is the moment where the empire becomes a target. Law enforcement does not need to catch every dealer on the street corner. Law enforcement needs to find the warehouse where the product is stored, and in the ransomware economy, the warehouse is the developer's laptop. The entire industry, with all its sophistication, all its encryption, all its anonymous payment layers, ultimately collapses into a single point of failure that a well-placed subpoena can unlock. And when that subpoena lands, the empire does not fall in a dramatic explosion. It falls in a cascade of betrayed trust, because the first thing prosecutors do with a captured developer is offer them a deal, and the second thing they do is watch the dominoes start to topple. The betrayal is not a side effect of the system. The betrayal is the system. Every layer of the ransomware empire is protected by the layer below it in exchange for immunity. And the layer below it is protected by the layer below that. And the mules at the bottom, the money movers who convert Bitcoin into cash and take a 2% cut, are the ones who get squeezed first when the pressure comes. They know the least, but they are the easiest to catch, because moving money leaves a trail of receipts, timestamps, and wallet addresses that no amount of cryptocurrency laundering can fully erase. The investigators who dismantled the networks that dominated the headlines in 2023 did not start with the developers. They started with a single compromised account, a single careless login, a single affiliate who reused a password from a personal email account that had been leaked in a data breach years earlier. From that one thread, they pulled the entire sweater apart, one affiliate at a time. Each one offered the same choice. Go to prison for a decade, or hand over the people you were working with yesterday. And this is where the moral calculus of the cybercrime empire reveals its most bitter irony. The developers, sitting in their safe rooms, genuinely believe they are running a business. They hold meetings about market positioning. They analyze which industries pay faster. They develop customer support portals where victims can negotiate their ransom payments more efficiently, because a frustrated victim who cannot reach anyone is a victim who calls the FBI. And that is bad for business. The entire enterprise is a parody of corporate efficiency, engineered to drain money out of the global economy with the same ruthless logic that a legitimate software company uses to maximize recurring revenue. But the parody has a fatal flaw that no legitimate business ever has to face. A legitimate company can fire a toxic employee. A cybercrime empire cannot fire anyone. The moment an affiliate is dismissed, they become a liability with a grudge. A person who knows the operational details, the developer handles, and the exact vulnerabilities of the infrastructure, and who has absolutely no reason to stay quiet when the police come knocking. The empire's only exit strategy for its own people is to hope they stay loyal, which is the equivalent of hoping your most desperate employee never decides to cash in the one asset they actually have, which is you. So the collapse, when it comes, is not a single event. It is a chain reaction that starts with one weak link and propagates through the entire network with the speed of a rumor. The first affiliate gets arrested in a hotel lobby in Miami, of all places, because nobody ever tells the street-level operators not to spend their earnings in the most surveilled city in the Western Hemisphere. The affiliate talks, because they always talk, and within 48 hours, the investigators have the identities of the developers. The developers who believed the encryption would protect them, who believed the anonymity of the dark web would protect them, who believed that the sheer scale of their operation made them too big to fail, are now sitting in a custody cell doing the same calculation they watched their affiliates do 1,000 times. The only question left on the table is the same question that has defined this entire industry since the first ransom was paid. Who do you hand over to make the problem go away? The answer to that question is the thing that collapses the entire empire faster than any technical exploit ever could. And it is the reason that the most sophisticated criminal network in history is held together by nothing more durable than the hope that today will not be the day. And that day always comes because the calendar of a cybercrime empire is not measured in quarters or fiscal years, but in the half-life of trust. And trust in this industry has a half-life of about one arrest. The empire does not die in a dramatic raid with helicopters and flashing lights. It dies in a conference room where a prosecutor slides a plea deal across the table and a developer realizes that loyalty is a luxury only the legitimate can afford. Every layer of the operation, the encryption, the anonymous payment channels, the redundant servers scattered across 3 continents, all of it was built to resist an attack from the outside, and none of it was built to survive the inside. Because the inside is made of people who chose this life for one reason, and that reason is not brotherhood, it is the margin. When the margin evaporates, so does the brotherhood, and what is left is a stack of evidence and a line of witnesses eager to be first. So what do we actually learn from the economics of a cybercrime empire, aside from the fact that crime pays until the exact moment it does not, and then it pays everyone else? The uncomfortable lesson is that the structure that makes these operations so profitable, the affiliate model, the modular hierarchy, the plausible deniability between layers, is the same structure that guarantees their destruction. A legitimate corporation can survive the departure of a key executive. A cybercrime empire cannot survive the departure of a single data point. The moment one person's self-interest aligns with the interests of the investigators, the entire architecture becomes a confession machine, each layer turning in the layer above it in the hope of buying a lighter sentence. It is not a business model. It is a time bomb with a payroll. And yet, the next empire is already being assembled by someone who believes they have solved the trust problem, who believes their encryption is better, their selection process stricter, their paranoia more refined. They are wrong, of course, but they will not find out until the day they do, which is the most expensive lesson in this industry, and the only one that is ever taught. The real price of running a cybercrime empire is not the infrastructure, not the payouts, not the legal defense. The real price is that you build a machine that can only be held together by people whose entire professional value is their willingness to betray you. And in the end, the empire always pays its biggest dividend to the first one who does.